I once had a patient who came in with stage 4 or metastatic breast cancer with spread to the lungs and liver, almost to the point that she was having really hard time, trouble breathing, as well as her, liver was not working. Our first line for these patients are usually chemotherapy when they come in with this, what we call visceral crisis. But since, her liver was not really working and her breast cancer was hormone receptor positive, we discussed trying out hormone therapy or endocrine therapy in this patient. And fortunately, she responded really well to hormonal therapy just because her estrogen receptor was very, very high. It was almost at 95%. And, she's been doing great. And she pretty much avoided chemotherapy. And, we've given her more than 5 years just with hormonal therapy. So once again, I think it's very important to talk to your doctor and make sure that you are a candidate for hormonal therapy, especially if you can't get chemotherapy.
Cancer is just something that we all have to recognize, acknowledge, cope with, live with, struggle with, rage upon, crush, and even thrive with. This show is more than knowing and fighting or beating cancer. It's more than just relaying science, hope, and technology. Together, our purpose is to demystify cancer, take away as much fear out of the diagnosis, treatment, and process as we can, defeat its grip on our lives. This is The Cancering Show. Welcome back to The Cancering Show. I am so excited to have Dr. Teja Pusarla in the studio with us today. She is a breast medical oncologist at the Mitchell Cancer Institute. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm so excited to be here today.
So that story that you told is just so incredibly dramatic. I think when you think of a patient who is literally on their deathbed with cancer and then you offer them hormonal therapy, I have had families say, is that it? Do you really think I'm dying? And think that we're offering them solace rather than actual cancer treatment.
Yeah, exactly. I think most people believe that hormonal therapy is not a real cancer therapy because it seems to be so benign and it doesn't have that side effects that you would think of chemotherapy, but it's a great arsenal and it's a great tool that we have.
Now, for our listeners, we have talked about chemotherapy and radiation and targeted therapies and immunotherapy, as well as how those relate to clinical trials. And so today, this next topic of hormonal therapy takes us really almost back to targeted therapy. So how do you describe that to your patients, Teja?
Our body naturally produces hormones that affect, regular body functions. We know that there are cancers such as breast cancer and prostate cancer that are very hormone sensitive to hormones such as estrogen and progesterone. And the way that we use hormonal therapy in these cancers is by pretty much trying to block off these hormones so that we're cutting off the food supply to these cancer cells. And we use them sometimes we can use them in combination with targeted therapies as well, to kind of increase the efficacy of the treatments and kind of override the resistance to the endocrine therapies.
Okay. Basically, in our bodies, specifically men and women having estrogen and progesterone for women and testosterone for men, these hormones for certain cancers can be a food for the cancer, and that cancer treatment is often an anti-hormone that blocks these hormones and then cuts off the food.
Essentially, yeah. So the hormones feed, I would say, the cancer cells by binding to their receptors. So they cause rapid increased cell division or cell growth. And by giving anti-hormonal therapies, we are essentially either decreasing the amount of hormones that our body is producing or blocking off the hormones binding to these cancer cells and decreasing the rate of the cancer cell growth, or essentially stopping this cancer cell growth.
Okay. And in the overall patient's treatment, how are we using hormones in the 21st century treatment of a cancer patient?
Usually, anti-hormonal therapy is used either in preventative setting or in treating primary cancers. So in a preventative setting for breast cancer, we can use these patients who have either a history of breast cancer or are at a higher risk of developing breast cancer, patients who have BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutations, or if they have a lesion such as atypical lobular hyperplasia, which makes them at an increased risk of developing breast cancer, we can start these patients on anti-hormonal therapy to decrease their risk of developing breast cancer. In a prostate cancer setting, patients who have been diagnosed with prostate cancer and have undergone surgery or radiation, we can put them on anti-hormonal therapy to decrease their chances of recurrence of prostate cancer as well.
And for my practice in GYN cancers, specifically in uterine and ovarian cancers, we often use hormones either as a prevention, as you have said, as primary treatment, sometimes in the very young for fertility preservation, or even in the very elderly when they're not candidates for surgery. And we also have used it in between chemotherapy treatments as kind of a break or a holiday from two more intense cancer treatments. And lastly, it can be used in the metastatic patients to provide something to slow cancer growth when there are not many other options.
Yes, that's true. Even in breast cancer, we utilize it very similarly. In metastatic patients, our first line these days is to use hormone therapies especially if they are hormone receptor positive breast cancers, in a way to avoid chemotherapy. I think about 20 or 30 years ago, the first line for these patients was chemotherapy, and it comes with, cytotoxic side effects and such. These days, we can do anti-hormonal therapy in combination with targeted therapy so that these patients have better survival as well as quality of life.
So really, to summarize, hormonal therapy is not just reactive to cancer. It can be proactive for patients who know that they are at increased risk. And, when we look at this and all the things we talked about with our listeners, it really is just another tool in the toolbox, something we can use to fight cancer, either on the front end or even before you have cancer, all the way to patients at the end of life.
That is true. I think it's very important to have an educated discussion with your physicians even before development of breast cancer to know if you are eligible for anti-hormonal therapy. Like I said, there are patients who are, if you're at high risk of breast cancer, if you have family history or strong family history of breast cancer, it's important to talk with your doctor to see if you're eligible for these therapies to prevent breast cancer.
Absolutely. We say the same in ovarian cancer. Actually, taking birth control pills can decrease your risk for ovarian cancer by up to 50%. So it's important to discuss the pros and cons. I think sometimes hormones get a bad name when it comes to cancer, and there definitely are ways to take it to decrease your risk. And also, again, of course, as an important element in cancer fighting tools that we use to treat patients who have cancer.
Yep, that is definitely very true.
You know what? This is a great time to take a break. We're going to do our innovation segment, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
Hello, I'm Ajay Singh. I'm a professor of pathology in the College of Medicine. I also direct the research division. In addition, I also lead a program in cancer biology at the Mitchell Cancer Institute. So me and my team, we mostly focus on the biology of the cancer. We focus on the process of cancering. And by cancering, I mean it's a process starting from the time when a single cell mutated and became cancerous to it progressed to the patient started having symptoms and he came to the clinic and he was diagnosed with cancer. After that diagnosis, people take the biopsies, they take the tumor to the pathologist, and they try to tell what kind of cancer do you have. Not all cancers are alike. Some cancers are very slow growing, some cancers are aggressive. But pathology cannot very correctly predict it. So in my lab, we are trying to define the tumor at the molecular level. We are trying to tell by looking at the molecules, okay, this cancer is slow growing and this cancer is more aggressive and you might need a different kind of treatment for those cancers. So we try to understand the molecular basis of cancer initiation, progression, and how it becomes so aggressive. At the same time, we are also studying why some cancers are unusually resistant to cancer therapies. They don't respond well. The hope is by understanding how the tumor initiates and progresses, and by characterizing at the molecular level, we may be able to identify novel biomarkers that can help in early detection, earlier than what we currently do. In addition, we can also find markers that can characterize the tumor into different categories. That way we can manage it better by giving them right kind of treatments. At the same time, by understanding why some cancers are so resistant, we can develop novel therapies that they are more effective in killing the tumors.
It's so great to hear all the amazing things going on at MCI. But now let's get back to our conversation. So when we think about these hormone blockers, how do you describe that to patients in your office when we're talking about what that really means, what anti-hormonal therapy is?
So some cancers are very hormone sensitive and hormone dependent, like the hormone receptor breast cancer and prostate cancer. So in these patients, the estrogen and progesterone, they're very, very sensitive to these hormones. So the way that I usually describe to my patients about these is that, in females, estrogen and progesterone is produced by your ovaries. In males, it's produced by adrenal glands and testes. So if a patient, male or female, comes in with breast cancer, the first thing that we check is for these estrogen and progesterone receptors. And if they are positive, then one of our therapies that we have is anti-hormonals with either aromatase inhibitors or tamoxifen. And they work differently in different patients. So we utilize aromatase inhibitors in postmenopausal women. And the reason for that is in postmenopausal women, estrogen and progesterone is not really produced by your ovaries, but essentially it's converted into, the androgens are converted to estrogens by peripheral conversion of enzymes. So these aromatase inhibitors target or inhibit that enzyme that converts the androgens to estrogens, essentially cutting off the food supply to these cancer cells and decreasing the rate of growth of cancer cells or preventing the formation of cancer as well.
So we talked about a couple different things there. First, I want to break down that these anti-hormones come in different categories, and some are, as you described, the aromatase inhibitors. The other category that you talked about, the tamoxifen, is a specific category called selective estrogen receptor modulator, or SERM. And the doctor and the patient together make the decision of which category of anti-hormone treatment is correct. And just in my practice also, sometimes in benign conditions as well, we use a different type of hormone blocker, the Lupron, something that actually works in the brain. Can you describe that for our listeners?
Yes, Lupron or Leuprolide pretty much is a anti-hormonal therapy that we use actually in breast cancer and in prostate cancer. And the way that it works is it affects your pituitary gland and it stops the release of, LH and FSH, and essentially decreasing your ovaries and testes from producing the sexual hormones of estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. And pretty much works the same way in that, once you decrease these hormones, you're once again cutting off that food supply to the cancer cells and decreasing their growth and their cell division. In breast cancer, Lupron is essentially used only for premenopausal women, once again, because, it affects your ovaries. And we use it for more advanced stage or higher stage breast cancers, hormone receptor breast cancer patients. If you are a lower stage and have a decreased risk of the recurrence of cancer, then we usually employ tamoxifen, just because there are lower or lesser side effects with tamoxifen versus using Leuprolide with an aromatase inhibitor.
And to go one step further, sometimes we even talk about removing ovaries, specifically to decrease the chance of cancer spread or progression if a woman has completed childbearing. That doesn't necessarily need to be done, but there are differences based on whether a patient is menopausal or not.
Yes, I think that was usually employed more in the older days when before we knew that Leuprolide was very equivalent to removal or oophorectomy. And usually at this time, like I said, usually we employ Lupron plus aromatase inhibitor for patients who are premenopausal and have an advanced or higher stage of breast cancer, usually stage 2 or stage 3. Most of the patients with stage 1, we do use tamoxifen just because we know that the survival rates and the recurrence rates are very equivalent between aromatase inhibitors and Lupron versus tamoxifen in lower risk patients.
And so the other thing that I wanted to cover was sometimes we talk about patients who are menopausal, maybe even already had their ovaries out, and yet we still are recommending anti-hormonal therapy. In my practice, we talk about endometrial cancer, which is an excessive amount of estrogen that is often related to obesity, that we know the adipose tissue can produce estrogen and result in, what I think in layman's terms is called a hormone imbalance. But I think that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. How do you counsel your patients about that?
I think most people think about hormone imbalance, usually related to estrogen and progesterone in a woman's health. Your body normally undergoes hormonal imbalance, during menopause or during pregnancy or during menstruation even. And there are medical conditions that you have a hormonal imbalance as well, like, polycystic ovarian disease. We know that when you have increased amounts of estrogen in your body, either naturally or synthetically, you have an increased risk of breast cancer as well as endometrial cancer. So, for example, when postmenopausal patients take hormone replacement therapy with estrogen and progesterone, we know that they are at an increased risk of developing breast cancer. And the longer they are on the hormone replacement therapy, the higher the risk of developing breast cancer. Fortunately, stopping hormone replacement therapy can normalize the risk within 3 years of stopping the hormone replacement therapy.
Right. And I think that's so important for women to understand that menopause is a natural state of having low hormones. And that is what your body is expected to go through in the 50s. I think so many women think because I'm menopausal, therefore this hormone imbalance that is really just a natural state of low estrogen has to be fixed or corrected. And that even taking medically prescribed hormones can have risks and benefits, and really is very important to discuss with your physician not only what you hope to gain from it, but also what those risks might be, including cancer. So now that we've covered kind of hormones and anti-hormones and things like that, lastly, we know every cancer treatment has side effects and risks. Let's talk about some of the most common side effects that you counsel your patients about when they go on an anti-hormone therapy.
I think each anti-hormonal therapy kind of comes with its own side effects. In general, most of these have hot flashes, night sweats. Once again, we are trying to decrease the amount of hormones that you have in your body, essentially kind of pushing you into a more menopausal state. So, you kind of have those similar symptoms as menopause, such as hot flashes and night sweats. You can also have joint aches or joint stiffness. It can cause mood changes, anxiety, depression. One of the big risks for anti-hormonal therapy is osteoporosis, which is, fragility of the bones, since, bone health is very related to those hormones. But we try to do bone density scans prior to starting these patients on anti-hormonal therapy, and we do follow them every 2 years. In case they do have osteopenia, which is a precursor for osteoporosis, we do start them on bone strengthening agents such as bisphosphonates or RANKL inhibitors to kind of help with that process. But all in all, it's definitely not very severe and not even close to the chemotherapy side effects.
And so as you look forward in the field of hormonal therapy specific to breast cancer, but also the larger catchment of all hormone-dependent cancers, what's really exciting you right now about the future here?
At this point, I think the biggest thing that's exciting me is the combination therapies. Until a few years back, endocrine therapies were the only modality that we had for treatment for the estrogen receptor or progesterone receptor positive breast cancers. And after they had resistance to this, it was really going to chemotherapy. Now we have multiple options with the targeted therapies that we can give, and that is prolonging their life and not them undergoing all the side effects that they experience with chemotherapy.
Exactly. And I think because we're trying hormones more, I think we're seeing them work more. Too often, we gave patients kind of chemo after chemo after chemo, thinking that that was the best thing. And as we learn more about targeted therapy, we really are trying to use hormones as a target and hormones in combination, even in very advanced disease, and finding success. It is something that we need to use more and understand that it can have benefit for patients. In years past, when we would have said, I'm sorry, there's nothing left.
Yep, that is definitely very true. I think it offers patients, especially with a lot of comorbidities or elderly patients who cannot tolerate chemotherapy, this is really their chance of having a good life, having a quality of life, and being there for their family and prolonging their life so that they can enjoy as long as possible.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming into the studio today. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think our listeners have gained so much information about what and how to ask their doctors about hormonal therapy. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to The Cancering Show with JYP, Dr. Jennifer Young-Pierce. Please subscribe, rate, and review this show on iTunes and anywhere else you listen to your favorite podcasts. Want us to deliver The Cancering Show to your email inbox? Contact us at cancering.com, and we can make sure you never miss an episode. We would love to know what you think about the show, or if you have any suggestions on topics you would like to hear. You can reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, and cancering.com. Till next time, be healthy, happy, and always thriving.
This show is brought to you by the University of South Alabama Mitchell Cancer Institute. MCI is a cutting-edge cancer research and patient center built to fight cancer smarter in Mobile and Baldwin County, Alabama. Our researchers and clinicians focus daily on the struggle against cancer, serving a potential catchment population of more than 4.1 million people, with a singular focus of advancing cancer diagnosis, treatment, and prevention throughout the Gulf Coast and beyond with science, technology, and hope. Want to know more about the Mitchell Cancer Institute? Visit us at usamci.com or search for us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Mitchell Cancer Institute is a member of USA Health. To learn more about all of our hospitals, clinics, and services, visit usahealthsystem.com.